friends, it's Chari, and today I'm creating a mini slimline card that has this fun little dragon and castle, and when you open it up you will see the back side of the castle and the dragon. So I'm using the dragon from Dream Big because it has a front and a back, and I'm stamping that in some jet black ink on some Nina Solar white cardstock or some lawnfawn white cardstock, and I'm going to be coloring it with my Copic markers. So I'm using 3 colors of green. I'll be using that darkest color for some little dots and accents. So I'm starting with that mid-tone, that YG06, and I'm coloring around the edges of the face and where the shadows would be. Then I'm going to go in with a YG01 and blend that color out to this very light kind of yellow-green. So I'm just going over where the darker color was and then filling in back to the lighter. And then I can go in with the darker again and add a little more shadows where I pulled it out a little bit too much. So I'll do the same on the back side. I'm just going to keep with the greens while I have my green markers out. So just like before, I'm going in with that YG06, coloring where my darker places will be, and then I will blend it out with that YG01. So I'm just pulling that color towards the white area with that lighter marker and filling in, and then I'll go back with that YG06 again once I've got it all filled in and add a little of that shadow back in. So right around the neck area, underneath the wings and the feet, and of course the bottom of his tail. Now I'm using that YG09 for some little details. So I'm adding just some little dots to kind of make it look like dragon skin. And I'm adding some to the back side as well. You want to make sure you do both sides. And then for the wings and the horns, and the little spikes down his spine, I'm going to be using purples. So I'm starting with that V12, which is my darker purple, adding a little bit where the dark areas will be, like the base of the horns and where the wings connect to the body. And then I'm just blending out with that V01. And now that I have him all colored, I can line up the coordinating dies, excuse my head as I line it up, and then I'll just hold that in place with a little bit of tape, and I'll die cut him out, and then I have my little dragon that's front and back. So I'll set the dragon aside, and then I'm going to use the Build a Castle die set to create my castle where my dragon lives. I've cut the main part of the castle from some narwhal cardstock, that's the lighter gray, and then those accent pieces on top of the towers are cut from storm cloud cardstock. I just put a piece of sunflower cardstock behind the window opening, just a little scrap that I had. I'm adding the tops to the 2 skinny towers, and then I'm going to add these towers to the main part of the castle on each side. And you can see how they line up with the kind of tower part that's cut at the top of each one that's on the main part of the castle. Then this part goes in front and will have a little topper to it as well. I'm not gluing that down to the body of the castle just yet. I'm just laying it here so I can get the placement right because there's a score line as a guide on the main body of the castle. I'm going to pop that up with foam, so that's why I'm not attaching it just yet. There's also the window frame that frames up the window nicely, and I cut that from some black shimmer cardstock. So I'm just using a little bit of liquid glue and my tweezers to make sure that's nice and lined up. Now, here is where I made a mistake. So I'm just going to tell you right now, I should not have glued the back of my castle on just yet because the whole idea was to make a 2-sided castle and I need to sandwich my card between my 2 pieces. So learn from my mistake and don't glue these together just yet. So you're going to see how I fix that here in a little bit. But I'm repeating the same thing on the back side of the castle with the window frame because the die of the main part of the castle is going to cut that window out regardless. So you might as well embrace it and put a window on the back side too. And of course, I need those same storm cloud cut pieces to accent the tops of my towers. Now I'm going to go ahead and put my dragon on here. Like I said, I messed up and I put these two pieces together too early, so you really don't want to put your dragon on just yet. But he's going to basically sandwich on both sides of this top of this castle. And I like how the die cuts the little arms out so that it can hang on to the front. So I've got the little arms overhanging the top of the castle. I've just put some liquid glue on the back and added a little bit to the castle as well to hold the bottom part of that dragon. And I'll just add a few more dots of glue and slip him back on. You're still going to do all these steps, you're just going to do it later in your card when you sandwich your two pieces of the castle together. Now you can use the brick stencil, which gives a cool brick look, but I wanted smaller bricks and I wanted them to be a little less regular. So I'm using some warm gray Copic markers. I'm using the chisel end and laying the skinny part of that chisel end flat to make little rectangle bricks kind of randomly all over my castle. And I'm not concerning myself with that center piece yet because I'm going to be covering that up with that piece you see on the right. And I'm using two tones. So I used a W5 first, which is the darker of the two. And then I'm going in with a W3. Now this W3 looks a little darker right now, but as it absorbs into the paper, it's going to be the lighter of the two colors. So I started with my darker and then I filled in with my lighter, and you can see there how that gives kind of a cool brick look without being just completely brick everywhere, and it's a much smaller scale. Now for my door, I cut two. I cut one from that same black shimmer cardstock, and I'm cutting the doors off of that one so that this can be the door frame. So my frame will match my window up top. And then I cut another one from rainforest cardstock, so I have this dark teal door inside of that shimmery black frame. So I'll just add a little bit of liquid glue, and this frame is going to fit over those doors perfectly. I'm also going to add the handles for the doors, which the die cuts these little teeny tiny half circles. I cut them from sunflower cardstock so it looks kind of like gold handles, and it pulls in the yellow that's in the window a little bit too. So to adhere this to the front of my castle, I just put glue all over the back. I don't really need the doors to open, but you could have them open if you wanted to. And then I'm adding my same little brick detailing that I had on the other parts of the castle to this one that's going to go in the front. So again, starting with that W5 and then adding some lighter bricks in with the W3. Now I'm adding some foam tape where this is going to go, so it's going to pop this up a little bit and give it some dimension, which will work fine because this is the front of the card. You wouldn't want to do this on the back side of the castle because that's inside the card, and you probably don't want to add foam inside the card. And then I started to add the towers to the back side, so that I have a castle that's pretty complete on the back side. And then this is when I realized I should not have glued these together because I need to sandwich the front part of my card between the two castles. So I'm going to very carefully pull them apart. This would be a lot easier if I did not use liquid glue and used a tape runner, but I managed to pull them apart okay and not damage or bend that castle too much. So I'm just pulling that apart. It's just going to sit there for a minute till I get my card base done. So a mini slimline, I'm making it 3 inches by 6 inches. So I have a 6-inch square. I'm lining it up at the halfway point, and I'm going to push my blade down till it is at about 4.5 there. And I'm going to cut up the center. This is where my fold is. And then I'm going to turn it, move it over to that 4.5 line, pull my blade down to 3, and basically cut out this corner. So that little skinny piece on the right side, that's going to be the front of my card. That's where my castle is going to go. Now I did try cutting this out with a folded piece and it did not work very well because the blade has a hard time cutting through a fold. So I just recommend cutting it and then folding it. And then I'm going to add those 2 pieces of cilantro cardstock to the front and the back. So I have a grassy ground for my castle to sit on. So these are cut to the same size, which is 1.5 inches by 3 inches. And of course I need to add it to the back because you're going to see that castle on the back side as well. I'm just making sure it's all lined up and stuck down really well. And then I can go back to my castle and I'm just going to add glue into the opening that I created by pulling it apart. Now, if you did not mess up and you haven't glued your pieces together yet, you can glue the front part of your castle onto the front of the card and then open it up and glue the back side of the castle to the front side. And then you can add your dragon. So learn from my mistakes and don't glue your castles together until you put it on your card base. So I'm just gonna sandwich that green piece between the castle in that liquid glue area. That liquid glue is gonna hold it nice and tight. And now you can see how this card's gonna work. So now I can go back to adding the other detail pieces to the back side of the castle. So I am adding the towers so that it doesn't look like the castle is naked on the back, but I'm not going to add the middle square piece or the door. Obviously the door is on the other side of the castle. I'm going to add this piece just to kind of fill it in because there is a score line there that shows you where that piece goes. So you kind of need to cover that part up. Now for the inside of the card, I have a piece of spiffy speckles paper. And I'm just gluing that to the inside and then I'm going to cut it off. And the reason I didn't cut it first to be 3 inches by 6 inches is because sometimes the paper isn't completely lined up and I didn't want to have a little white sliver on the side if I didn't get it exact. So this is a good way to kind of get it exact. Now I'm going in with some of the other little detail pieces in the Build a Castle set. I love these cute little banners, so I've cut some from peacock cardstock and I'm putting those on the towers. There's also a die that cuts a little tiny round top window that you can add to the towers as well. So I cut the frame of it from that same shimmer black cardstock, just like all the other frames. And then I cut it again from Sunflower and I'm just dropping the inside in. There is a die in the set that makes a bigger one that you just layer behind, but I think just dropping it in is a little bit easier for me. Now I have some stitch clouds from the Spring Showers die set. These are all the same small size. And I've just kind of scattered these around so it looks like my dragon is up in the sky. This is like a really tall castle. And then I can just trim off the edges of those 2 that overhang the sides. Now to add my sentiment. So I'm starting out with a sentiment that says, "Have a magical day." And I'm going to stamp that right below my castle on that cilantro cardstock. And then I'm going to continue that sentiment on the inside, but this is a little too long, so I'm cutting between the words. Don't freak out. These can always be lined back up on a block together. So I'm making the sentiment that says, "May all of your wishes come true," 2 lines instead of 1. And I'm lining it up to where it will be hidden by the castle when the card is closed, and then you'll see the sentiment when you open it. Just kind of a fun, magical reveal. I'm adding a few more details to the front. I decided I needed to fill in those little stars on the banners, so I cut some from some Guava cardstock. So I dropped those pink stars into the peacock cardstock banners, and then I'm using the same banners that I cut out of Guava and putting some little peacock stars in them. So all my banners match with the same 2 colors. And I just think these add some fun little details. Then I felt like my castle was missing something when you opened it up on the back side. It was a little too plain, and I realized I didn't have my brick details on there. So I'm going back in with those same Copic markers, a W5 and a W3, and adding those little brick details. And then here is my finished card. I just think that's a really fun way to use that dragon that has a front side and a back side. Hopefully this has inspired you to maybe make a fun card like this that has a front and a back. Thanks so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.